Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. We all have written forms in SwiftUI like this one, add movie view. It consists of a movie name and it consists of a Boolean property called is released. The movie name is used for the text field and the is released Boolean is used for toggle, and the result is the form that is created as you can see in the Xcode previews. But what if I tell you that you can do all of those things automatically, meaning you can create a form based on the variables that you have defined. This means that all of this can go away and you can simply decorate this with a custom macro. Let's call it FormBuilder. And the FormBuilder macro is going to look at the movie name and the isRelease property and then create the complete form interface, meaning the body property, the actual view declaration for you. So let's go ahead and see that how we can do that and how we can create this form using macros. For this, we have to create a Swift macros project. And before I even begin that, this is very experimental. This is basically, I'm just trying to show you that it can be done. Should you be doing it in your app? That's up to you. So please keep that in mind that this is very much as an idea. And if you want to go and build on top of this, then go ahead and do it. Perfectly fine. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started with creating our macro, the form builder macro. The first thing you will notice is that although Xcode 15 beta 3 has been released, I'm still using Xcode version 15 beta 2 because beta 3 is insanely buggy. So even if you create a macro project using a template, it's not going to build. It will cause a lot of issues. So if you have Xcode beta 3 or if you can download Xcode beta 3 and work along with this particular lecture, then it's fine. Okay. I'm going to go to new and then to package, and then from the multi-platforms I'm going to select Swift macro so that I can create a Swift macro application. You can name your macro anything you want. I'm just going to call it Sharp. That's fine. But you can call it Form Builder or whatever you need. That's fine. Okay. Let's make sure that the font size is correct. Let's go to settings. And okay, looks fine. Okay. So this is our project for the macro. If you don't know how to create macros, I have an original video that I will link in this YouTube description in which we created the macro to automatically generate the title property for an enum for all the cases. So you can definitely check that one out. Okay. So in this particular macro, you can see that we have a stringify macro that is already there by default. It's just the code that's already written for you. But what we want to do is we want to create a form builder macro. So I'm going to go over here in the Sharp macro file and I'm going to create a public struct. I'll call it form builder macro and it will be a member macro. So member macro is actually a protocol, and the reason that we're using a member macro is that this macro is going to be acting on a particular struct, and that will allow us to add a property to it. All right. In the main file over here, you can see that you can just test some code out. So basically what we're trying to do is, if I go ahead and import SwiftUI, is we're trying to create, we will already have a struct over here. Let's say add movie view. And if it is a view, then it must contain the body property, right? So what we're trying to do, or what our macro at least is trying to do, is we will not create this by hand because that is something that will create the form, that will have the form and all that, right? So what our macro will do is our macro is going to read all of these state properties that we will have. Let's say movie name and all that stuff, and then we can have another property, maybe is released, which is Boolean. So based on these properties that our struct, which is conforming to view, will have, it's going to go ahead and create the form for us. Well, it's going to write the whole body for us. So that's the job of the macro. So instead of clearing this, instead of having this body property, we will end up having just the actual macro. That's it. And this is going to make sure that when this app actually runs, the add movie view will automatically generate the body property, and it will have a text field for the movie name because it's string, and a toggle for is released because this is a Boolean. So all of this will happen when you are, when you're creating the form builder macro, which we're trying to create, which we're trying to implement. Let's go back to the sharp macro. Now you can see that we have created the struct for the form builder macro, which is conforming to member macro, but right now we do need to implement some of the required functions, and one of them, and actually the only one, is called expansion. The expansion function is going to return you the generated code, and you can see that it returns an array of Swift syntax.declaration syntax. So right now I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to go ahead and return an empty array, and that's it. Okay. The other thing that we need to do is we need to add the plugin over here also. You can see that we already have one plugin for stringify macro, which is created by the template itself, but we will also create the form builder macro. There we go. And we need to go back to the file, like sharp file over here, and we need to register our macro also. Right now there's only one macro being registered, which is stringify, but if we want to expose our macro to the outside world, we need to export it over here also. Also make sure that this is not your phone, this is the Mac, and I think that's one of the issues that people usually face. So make sure that the destination target is actually your Mac. So let's go ahead and create a macro. This is a attach macro, so we're defining that what our macro will be, and it will be a macro, well, over here, expression, sorry, it will be a member, because this is a member macro, and the names this property or this particular macro will be adding, it will add one property called body. This is a macro that will be generated. This will be the property that this macro will generate. I'll call this particular macro form builder. That's fine. And now we need to define external dependencies, or basically the module and the type. Now the module will remain the same, whatever is the module for the stringify. That's the same part, which is sharp macros. That's the name of our module anyway. Sharp macros, and the type will be the type that we have created for the macro, which is form builder macro. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this. Build this succeeded. That's great. By the way, this type, the form builder macro, is coming from right here, which we created, form builder macro. Okay, so we're definitely on the right track. This particular macro that we are creating, this can only be applied on a struct. And the reason it can only be applied on a struct is because when we create a view, the view is basically a struct. So and this macro can only be applied to a struct. So let's go back, and we can make sure that the macro is applied on the struct. All right. In order to find out if the macro is applied to the struct, we can simply go ahead and use the declaration.as, and we can find out if this macro is applied on the struct or not. So you can see right here, we're saying declaration as struct declaration.self if its casting is correct. If it's not, then it's going to throw this error called struct init error. We still need to implement this struct init error. And the implementation of the struct init error is provided in the WWDC video, so you can definitely check that out. It basically looks kind of like this. struct init error is a custom string convertible and an error, so we can go ahead and implement the description also. Great. Now, when we casted to struct declaration right there, we need to find out the tree, meaning all the tree that is being generated behind the scene, because using the tree structure, we'll be able to grab the properties of a type of the member on which this particular macro is being applied. So we need to grab the movie name, we need to grab the is release, so we need to grab all the different properties of the add movie view. So how do we do that, right? In order to do that, the best way would be to debug your application and simply print out the value of struct declaration. This is going to allow you to find out that what struct declaration looks like. So I'll put a breakpoint right over here. In order to reach this particular breakpoint, we can go ahead and jump into the test project. Test project is right there. You can see that currently it does contain some tests, but those tests are mainly for different kind of thing, like for testing the macro for stringify. But if we wanted to test something for our FormBuilder macro, we will need to do that. We need to implement that case. So I'll say function test FormBuilder macro, assert macro expansion. So when we talk about macro expansion, basically what we're saying over here is that how the code will look like when you're applying the macro and what will be the expanded form for the macro. All right. Now, I'll be honest with you, testing is a little bit hard on the macros. And the reason is that because you're comparing one string to the generated string, and even the indentation that will basically fail the test. So in my case, I don't really test this. I mean, I just, for small macros like this one, I can simply test it by just expanding the macro in the main file, and I'll show you that. All right. But this can definitely help you to debug the macro, because when you test, we can jump into the debugger and we can see the whole tree structure of the struct declaration variable. So this macro is applied something like this. So let's say we have add movie view, which is view. See, you can already see the indentation issue, right? So you have to make sure that your indentation is correct, or else it's not going to match. And you're going to be applying the macro also. So I can go ahead and apply the macro. We'll call it FormBuilder. We will have two different properties in our macro. Again, you have to make sure the indentation is correct. There we go. And now in the expanded source, right over here, you need to define that what will happen after the macro has been applied. Like, how will it actually look like? And that's actually a little bit of a difficult part, because you have to match it exactly. Okay, so I'll try my best. Probably it's not going to pass the test, by the way, but I'll try my best to create this. Right? So I'll do something like this. Again, you can already see such a problem with the indentation, and that's going to make sure that the test has actually failed. There we go. But when we are applying this particular macro, which is the FormBuilder macro, what we are assuming is that what code will be generated. Now, I don't really know if the FormBuilder is supposed to be there or not. We can try it out with that. But obviously, when this macro is running correctly, the whole point of the macro is to create a body property, right? That's what the macro is doing. Again, you can see the indentation issues right there. And it will create a text field. And the text field will say, let's say, movie name. I mean, I guess that's what we're expecting. And the text would be something like this, movie name, I guess. And then we will have like a toggle or something, right? So toggle, and we'll have to double check how the toggle is actually working. You can always just write it over here and kind of like copy paste it if you want to. let's say if I create this, I can go ahead and create a toggle. See that? So you have access to all of these different things. So you can even copy it from here. Is released, and toggle will be simply the binding equation of that, is released. So now we can go ahead and kind of like copy it over here. And you can already see that the testing is very volatile. It's very brittle. It can break anytime. For the macros over here, I'm just going to go ahead and pass in test macros. And in the test macros array, I'm going to add the macro over here. So I'll just call it form builder macro. And that will be form builder macro.self. If you run the test, it's obviously going to fail because right now, when you attach this macro to anything, it does not create the body property. So this particular test will fail, but we're not really writing the test right now to fail or pass. We're just writing the test right now so that we can jump into this code and we can debug it. So let me go to the main file first and just comment this out. There we go. And we have the breakpoint over here on the return so that we can print out the struct del variable. I can go back to my test and try to run it. Hopefully when the test is running, it's going to go and hit that point in our file, which is right here, line number 47. And then it should be able to see what's going on. But it didn't even go there at this point, right? I mean, it didn't even landed on this particular point right now. So we need to see what exactly is going on. It didn't even work. All right. So let's see how we can fix that. So one correction we have to make is that the name over here is FormBuilder macro is supposed to be just FormBuilder, because if we go back to our sharp file, this is the one that we're saying. This is basically we're exporting it. We're saying that FormBuilder is the name, and it points to this external macro. All right, so that is the name that we have to use in our test also. So I'm just going to go ahead and name it to FormBuilder so that the test will know what the module is and where it points to. Now, having done that, let's go ahead and run the test again. And this time you can see that we are actually able to debug the macro. So we are currently in the debugging mode. And I can go ahead into the debugger and write print output struct del because I just wanted to see what it looks like. And it prints kind of like this, like a tree structure, as you can see. All right. And this is a very important part because this is going to help you to, to find out what exactly is going on. So let me go over here. It's definitely a good idea to copy this somewhere. So let's see if I can stop the test because that's what I was after, all of this stuff. So let's copy this somewhere. Let's go ahead and I guess it will copy if I just copy it. Hopefully it has copied. Where should you copy it? It's up to you. You can copy it in a completely different file or you can simply copy it right here, but make sure you delete it when you publish your macro. Okay, this is just for you as a developer. Nobody else wants to see this. So this structure, the whole tree structure, is going to give you access to the different properties of, the add movie view or whatever the structure on which it is applied. And what we are after is we are after the, the properties over here. What we are after is all the different properties that we have declared. So in this case, it is a movie name right here. And we should be able to find some other property also. Let's say is release right there. So all of those properties are actually there, which is great because we will be able to use that. So we just need to go ahead and now access those properties. And looks like all of those properties are inside. If you start from the add movie view, they are inside member block and then inside members. All right, so members is obviously an array, so we should be able to access those things. So now I can go over here. I can say members and struct declaration dot member. Well, not really members. I don't think there's any members. It's member block dot members. Okay, great. Once we have the members, then we can access other stuff from it, like variable declarations. So once we get all the members, the next step would be to use or to create an array of variable declarations. And when I say variable declaration, currently I only mean these things right here. Movie name is one of them. And the other one will be is released, right? So how do we do that? Well, we already have the members. We can go through the members. We can do compact map so that if they are providing us nil values, we're just going to ignore that. And then whatever we're getting it from the compact map, we're going to try to perform or try to convert it into a variable declaration syntax. So variable declaration syntax.self. This is going to give us all the variable declarations. Great. All right. And let's see over here what is going on. That's fine. Okay. Okay, so after the variable declaration, what are we trying to do? So again, we'll have to go back over here and see what exactly is going on. So we have the variable declaration, we have the name over here, we have the name over here. We're looking for something called, so this is inside something called pattern, right? So if we want to get access to the variable movie name, we'll probably go ahead and say pattern to get those variable names. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. So from the variable declarations, we can probably run another compact map to get all the patterns, which will be the actual name, I guess. All right, so we'll say variable names. And let's go ahead and run our test so that we can see what these values are. What is variable names, what is variable declarations, and so on. So I'm just going to go back to the test and try to run the test again now. And the only reason I'm running the test is that so I can enter the debugging mode. Now I'm in the debugging mode. I'll go over here into the output window and I'll say PO variable names. And there we go. We actually got the variable name. So that is exactly what we were after. And we are able to get two elements. Well, that's because we have two variable names, the movie name and its release. And that is exactly what we were after. Great. The next thing we need to do is we need to get the type of the variable. I mean, the variables can be Boolean, they can be string, and so on. We'll use the primitive values. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through the variable declarations, and we are going to get the types. So that those types will be like strings. Those types can be integer and float and double and all that stuff, and Boolean. So we'll get the type. After that, we can go ahead and start building the structure for our body. So I'll simply say over here body, and that will be a string. And we can add some sort of an initial part of the body that will be common. And since we're creating a form, we can even create some part of the form. So I'll say some view. There we go. Actually, we shouldn't close it, right? Because that is where we will enter other stuff. There we go. We have the form. Okay. Because everything will go inside the form. Next up, what we will do is we will go through the variable names and the variable types. So for name and type in, and we can use the zip modifier or the zip function. And what the zip function is going to do is it's going to start picking up values from each of the collections or the sequence that we're passing. So one time the name will be whatever the name is, and alongside will be the type associated, well, not really associated with that name, but at that level. So if the first one is movie name, the type will be string. If the first one in that particular order, so the order in this case is actually important. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass in variable names and variable types. So it's going to pick one value from each of these variable names and variable types array, and using the zip function, it's going to create a pair, and now I can access the pair. Now, what should we do with it? So if the variable type, meaning the type is as a simple type identifier syntax.self, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to see that if this type is actually, string. So that is what we are trying to do. And I'm sure there are much better ways of doing that, but I'm just going to use this way right now, which I don't really like. I think there has to be a much better way of checking that if a type is string or not. But if the type is actually string, then we are going to go ahead and create a text field. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a text field over here. I don't really like this. I'm sure there's a much better way of doing this. I don't like it at all. Double equal to, I guess, because we're comparing. So we're going to create a text field, and the text field will simply say enter, and then whatever the name is, right? Whatever the name over here is, which will be the movie name. This is the name of the actual variable. So that will be the movie name. All right, so that's the important part. And after the comma, we will say text, and this will be the actual binding with the same exact name. So that will be just a name property over here again. All right, and then we will close it. So that is going to work when we have a type string. We will create a text box. The other parts are if there is a Boolean, else if type is a sample type, which is a simple type identifier syntax.self, and the name.text is Boolean. And you can see all of these things, by the way, right? If you look at the structure over here, you should be able to see the identifiers over here, whether they are Boolean or they are something else. So right here is Boolean, and somewhere over here will be string. There we go. All right. Okay. So if the type is actually Boolean, now Boolean will be a little bit different because for every Boolean variable, what we want to do is we want to create a toggle so that you can turn on or off. So I'll say body plus equals to, and I'll create a toggle. Toggle is on, and is on will be simply part of whatever the name that we're doing, but with a dollar sign because it has to be a binding variable. And we will end that. We'll start this particular body of the toggle. I mean, that's up to you, right? How you create the toggle, I guess. Plus equals to, and I'm just going to put a text over here, but you can put anything you want. Text. And for the text, it's going to be wrapped up with, let's say, right over here. Yes, have to be very careful with all of these codes and all that stuff, right? Because there's so many things that you're using over here. And then body plus equals to, and then we can close it out. Great. So there are only two conditions for our case, at least. There's a condition for a Boolean, and there's a condition for a string. The final thing we want to do is we want to close out our body because we open the body right over here. On line number 53 and 54, the form is open. We never closed it. So let's go ahead and close it also. There we go. And again, the indentation is always an issue over here. So we'll indent it correctly. And for the returning part, we can now return the declaration syntax with the string literal, because we do have a string literal now, which is body. So that is something that we will simply return. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, so over here we are having some issues. I wonder if it's related to anything that we're doing. Let's go ahead and build it. I think, again, you can see the indentation issue was the issue. And that's it. All right, so this is all the code that we will use to create our FormBuilder macro. In order to test it out, you can always jump into your sharp test and run the test and try to see if it creates the same structure or not. Or you can simply go over here to your main file. This is kind of like your play area, and we can do it over here also. So let me remove this. And since the body will be created automatically, I'm just going to remove the body tag also. Let's go ahead and build it. Okay, so it already failed, right? You can already see there's a problem over here. And this is the generated code. Now we need to find out what exactly is the problem over here. All right, so it's saying something with the expression. Maybe the toggle got messed up because the text field kind of looks okay to me. Yeah, the form is closed. The text field, the toggle looks kind of weird. Okay, so if I remove the is release, is that going to work or not? I'm just going to build it again. Okay, so then it works correctly. And I can always click on the macro and say expand macro, and you can see that it kind of works correctly. So what I want to do is I want to get this back. And I know that it is having some issues over here. So this means the toggle is having some issues. So I'm just going to change the toggle a little bit. I probably have missed something out. There we go. So now you can check out what I have missed, but hopefully this will be good enough to work. Let's go back to our main file. Let's go ahead and build it. And it builds successfully. You can always go ahead and right click on it and say expand macro. And now this is the generated code. You can see the indentation is all messed up, but this is at least a generated code. All right. So this looks fine. I think the generated code looks fine. Maybe the form has to be moving a little bit over here just for the indentation purposes. We can definitely try to do that. Let's go ahead and say 1, 2. And now we'll go back to the main, see if it generates a little bit better. Okay, I guess that's much better. That's fine. But based on whatever we have the state properties, it is creating the form for us. So I think that is pretty cool, right? This is just an idea, by the way, right? It's not like, oh, wow, now I should start converting. I should start using this macro and start converting all my code to use this form builder. It's just an idea. Maybe this idea will be developed much in the future, or you can work on it and see the other possibilities. That's fine. But at least it's a good idea, I think, and it's going to reduce the number of different things that you're going to be writing. So now what we want to do is we want to import this particular macro in our application and see how it works. So I'm just going to build the app and the macro project. I'm going to close it, open up a different project, which is a FormBuilder demo. Okay, let's see if the FormBuilder demo actually shows us something. Okay, that should be okay, hopefully. So this particular FormBuilder demo or any other SwiftUI application that you're building, currently it does not have access to that particular macro that we just created. So we need to do that, all right? So I'm just going to try to see how we can add that. Add package dependencies. There we go. And the package is actually a local package that we're trying to add. It's not really available on GitHub. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this add local button so that I can add it locally. And we'll go to desktop. I'll just click on sharp because that is where the project or the package is. I'll say add the project. And it's going to add the local dependency to my FormBuilder demo. Now it does have different products, I guess. The Sharp, which is a library, and the Sharp client. The Sharp client was just used for testing, so we don't really care that much about that. But the Sharp, this is the package that I actually want that contains the form builder. So let's go ahead and add that. Okay, so it should be added, hopefully. And now we should be able to test it out. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove, first let it build, I guess. It's sometimes these packages can take forever to build for some reason. It's trying to build at least, that's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove the body property. Now you are looking at a view which is called add movie view, and I'm just removing the body property, which now it means that it's not really conforming to the view protocol, because if you're conforming to the view protocol, you must have a body property, so we're not. And instead of conforming to it, I'm just going to try to see if we can import Sharp, that is our module, and then decorate this particular view with the form builder. Okay, so I've decorated this with a form builder. You can see that still it doesn't really recognize the Sharp module, maybe because it's building. You can see right there on the top, it's actually building. So we'll check back a little bit later and see that if it recognizes those things. All right. All right, so after finally the build is successfully completed. The only problem is that for some reason the Xcode previews is not working. It's giving me these errors. I guess these are coming from some sort of a dependency, and they're using some older versions or something like that. Unfortunately, this is a problem that I don't know how to fix, but we can always go ahead and run it in a simulator, and that's what we are doing. You can see right over here on the right side that I am running it on a simulator, and the macro is actually working. I mean, it is creating a text box for the movie name, and it is creating a toggle for is released. Let's go ahead and change this. Let's go ahead and say that, well, I need another thing or something like that. So I'm just going to say a state private var year, which will be a string. And let's also add a couple of different things, right? I mean, we only support right now the string and the Boolean, so I'm just going to say a director name. So now I'm adding like a couple of different things over here. And this particular view does not really have a body property because we have decorated it with FormBuilder, and it's going to create the body property with all the form elements on its own. So let me go ahead and run this in the simulator, because the Xcode previews is apparently not working correctly with this kind of a macro. And here we go. See that? Movie name for the movie name, year, director name is released. So our macro is responsible for creating the user interface. Great. So at least it's a good idea, and maybe this will be used for some kind of apps in the future, or you can investigate much further and pass a model, some sort of a struct model to the actual macro so that you don't have to declare these things. You will simply just pass in some sort of a struct and be done with it. All right, so at least this will give you an idea of things that are possible when using Swift macros. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you. If you like this video and want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses on Udemy. I have a brand new course on Swift data. This is a course that I'm still working on, so as soon as I create one more section, I just publish it so that you can enjoy it. Currently, the course is around 4 hours long, and you can already see that close to 250 students. And it covers state management. It covers getting started with Swift data, one-to-many relationship, many-to-many relationship, understanding the queries. And I'm also going to be adding migrating core data and also just general migration testing. All of this stuff is coming very soon. So stay tuned for that. The link to this course will be right there in the YouTube description, so make sure you check it out. Thank you so much.